This is a CBC podcast.
I'm Brett Ruskin, in for Bob Murphy. This is Maritime Noon. Today on the phone-in, Marjorie Willison is back to keep your plants healthy and blooming, and apparently plants enjoy a cup of tea sometimes, just like us.
If you're interested in giving it a good, quick boost, save family tea in the bucket and dilute it 5 parts water to 1 part tea, and water it with that once. That will give it a good shot of nitrogen.
Get ready to call Marjorie Willison for tips to keep your garden growing. That's coming up on Maritime Noon. But first, the city of Halifax looks beautiful from above, and sometimes the temptation to get that view is just a little bit too strong. This morning, a construction crew arrived at work to find a man in his 20s inside the cab at the top of a construction crane after climbing up there overnight. Brad Connors is District Chief with Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency, and he joins us now. Welcome to Maritime Noon, Brad.
Hi, Brett.
So, what happened this morning?
So approximately 7:15 this morning, we received a call from the construction company on Joe Howe that they had an unresponsive individual in their crane on their construction site.
How big of a crane are we talking about?
Well, so it's one of the regular cranes you see all over the city now. We seem to be in a bit of a construction boom, so it's a typical a construction crane, and I would say this one's probably up approximately 100 feet or so. So it's up there a ways.
I heard it was like 8 or 9 stories. So it's up there a ways. That's quite a climb.
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned that he was unresponsive. Was he sleeping? Was he unconscious? What did crews find when they arrived there?
Yeah, so after the initial crane operator went up and found the individual slumped over in the operator's seat, he tried to get his attention. The crane was actually locked by the individual, so he couldn't get in the operator's section. That's when he came down and called 911. When our rescue technicians arrived, they made their way up to the crane. They were able to make contact with the individual, woke him up. We believe he was under the influence of something at the time, although we're not sure. So they were able to make contact. He was very groggy and not very responsive, but we were able to communicate with him. And then with that, the rescue techs assessed his medical needs and situation and determined that we could, in fact, perform a rescue at that time.
So just to be clear, crane operator shows up for his shift just like any other Friday morning, climbs up the crane to where he would typically be working in the cab, finds the cab locked, and someone sleeping or unconscious inside. Is that what you're saying happened today?
That's correct, yes. And
so how dangerous of a situation could this have been? What was this?
Well, very dangerous. People, obviously, the construction crews are trained in climbing techniques and safety procedures and in about the operation of the crane itself. Not to even mention the construction site. I mean, if you've ever been on a construction site, there's many hazards that the civilians are not trained for or unaware of. So the site itself can be dangerous to the untrained, and then the crane is a whole other matter altogether. So, very dangerous, number one, for an individual, sober or not under the influence to climb up there. But under some kind of influence to climb up there and then to be locked in the cab of the crane is an extremely dangerous situation.
And then waking up to that is a bit of a rough way to wake up.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely could think of some better ways on a Friday morning. But, our rescue technicians, again, did a fantastic job to go up and be able to make contact with the individual to get them conscious enough that we were able to talk and assess their medical situation. And then, again, those individuals are trained to create a plan to rescue that individual to minimize any more hazards or potential harm that could come to them, for sure.
And so how did that happen? How did crews get him down?
So what they were able to do, once they determined that the individual didn't have any medical conditions such he didn't suffer, cardiac arrest or, other than his potential impairment, they were able to put him in a harness, which then is attached to some ropes, which they attach to some anchor points on the crane. And through the assistance of our rescue technicians, the individual was able to come down under their own power, with the assistance of the ropes and harness and a rescue tech below and above, just in case the individual did get into any problems on the way down. If we would have encountered a situation where the individual couldn't have come down under their own steam, then we have several other options where the technicians would either put him in a basket or put him in another type of harness and actually what we call tether themselves to that individual and come down as one unit. And that way the rescue tech could constantly monitor the individual for any medical situation might arise.
We mentioned it before, but this could have ended in tragedy, but things seem to have ended safely, right?
Yeah, best case scenario for us, our members, for their safety, and obviously for the individual that decided to climb up there. So many things could have gone wrong at any point in time. That this has definitely been the best case scenario.
So, advice for folks who might want to get a view of the city?
Go to Citadel Hill maybe and have a look at the harbor that way, or get one of your friends that lives in an apartment building that's already finished and go up and have a peek at the city from those heights. But definitely don't climb any cranes or go on any construction sites, that's for sure.
Good advice. Hey, Brad, thank you for taking our call. I appreciate it.
No problem, Brad, anytime.
Thank you. Brad Connors is District Chief with Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency. Now, we also reached Halifax Regional Police. They also spoke with this 20-year-old male who had climbed up the crane in Halifax and was found inside the cab. Halifax Regional Police confirm that no charges are expected at this time.
You're listening to Maritime Noon on CBC Radio 197.1 FM in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, or on the internet at cbc.ca/maritime noon.
Time now is 12:13 here in the Maritimes, and it is time for our phone-in. It is something that we wait for through the long winter months, the chance to get out in the garden and get that space growing. The last few weeks we've seen intense heat, plus the wind and the rain that we're seeing now from Elsa as it moves through the region. If you have questions on getting the most out of your garden, out of your shrubs, out of your trees, in any weather condition, now is your chance to get some free advice. Our phone lines are now open. 1-800-565-1940. That is the number to call. 1-800-565-1940 anywhere in the Maritimes. Our email address is marnoon@cbc.ca, or you can tweet us at CBC Maritime Noon. Our guest today is gardening expert Marjorie Willison, author of East Coast Gardener. Hello, Marjorie.
Hi, Brett.
This is the first time we've spoken on Maritime Noon. Thank you so much for chatting with me and chatting with our callers who are going to call in.
Well, as always, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we've got a couple of people on the line, but first I want to talk about this storm that we have coming in. So a bit of wind, a bit of rain. Should folks be worried about their plants in this type of storm that's on its way or already here?
Well, there's no sense worrying because there's not a lot you can do. I do think it's important to put away things like wheelbarrows, and if you have row covers, make sure they're firmly anchored. So they don't blow off, or else remove them. Yes, the wind would get at your plants, but it could also lift the cover off, too. So, it depends how much of a gambler you are, what you want to do that way.
You could make it exciting and just leave it. That's great. All right.
Yeah.
You know what? We are already getting calls because you are so popular, Marjorie. And so let's go straight to our first call of the day. Job Burns is on his cell phone right now near the Nova Scotia-New Brunswick border. Job, first question. Is it busy at the New Brunswick-Nova Scotia border right now where you are? Did you just cross?
Hi, yeah, I did just cross. It actually wasn't too bad. I was through in about 5 minutes, and I'm on my way to Halifax now.
Perfect. While we're on the line, now you can talk about plants. Thanks for the border update.
No, you're welcome. Thank you guys so much for taking my call. And Marjorie, I want to thank you for your advice last week about squash and cucumber beetles covering with cheesecloth. I had a neighbor who was getting pretty dire, and I was able to pass that information along. But my question is, I purchased a hibiscus tree, indoor hibiscus, last December, and it has not stopped budding since then. I've probably had about 100 buds, but I've only had 3 actually bloom. So I'm wondering, is it something that I'm doing that they're not actually coming to fruition?
So you mean it sets buds, but they don't open?
Yes, I can, and some of them will. I'll be able to see the orange peeking through, but then they either fall off or they just don't actually blossom.
Do the leaves look healthy?
Yep, the leaves are healthy. I have had some low leaves yellow and fall off, but I was at the tree when I purchased it was about a foot high, and it's about 2 feet high now. So I was told that it's normal for low leaves to drop.
Yes, that is. So what kind of fertilizer do you use on it, or do you?
I use plant food about every 3 months.
Oh, that sounds pretty good. You could probably up it to maybe once a month, just a week solution, except in the winter when it's kind of resting. But choose fertilizer that's high in the middle number. You know, it comes with NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And just sprinkle a little on the soil surface and scratch it in. Or if you can get it in a liquid, then water it in. And never make it stronger than what's recommended on the bottle. You know, a little bit is good, a lot is not good. And see if that helps.
Okay, perfect. Is it normal for it to bud for 6 months?
Oh, yes, they can bloom for a long time.
Oh, okay, sounds great.
There you go. Perfect.
All right. Thanks,
I will cross my fingers for you.
Oh. Thanks.
We're all crossing our fingers, Joe. Thank you for the call. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Now, Marjorie, this guy, Bob Murphy, he left just a stack of emails from the last time that you were on the show because so many people had so many more questions. And folks can always email us anytime, marnoon@cbc.ca. So can I give you a couple of quick snappers, Marjorie?
Yes.
Shiro plum tree and Italian plum tree planted close together, not producing a lot of fruit. Is cross-pollination possibly a problem? That's from Sarah.
I do not know.
Next one. Here we go. Hydrangeas. When, how, and what is the best time of year to move a hydrangea?
Oh, it's always best in early spring, like as soon as the soil can be worked and not stick to your boots. Like you don't want...
Good test.
You know, early it can be really mucky. So it depends what kind of hydrangea she has. So something like an Annabelle hydrangea, you would cut that back hard every spring. A lace cap hydrangea, you would hardly ever prune it except to cut out dead wood. Probably the best thing for her to do is if she can figure out what the name of that hydrangea is, what kind it is. And
yeah,
then
we used to have hydrangea. Yeah, okay. One more. Lilac bush, fully blossomed this year. This one comes from Pearly with the email. Fully blossomed, but after a hot couple of days, every single blossom died within 24 hours. Is that going to affect next year's blossoms?
No. If the person wants to cut off those faded blossoms, make sure that you cut off just the blossom. Don't cut, several inches lower down from the blossom because that will stop blooming next year.
Perfect. Okay. The stack of emails is just a little bit smaller. Thank you, Marjorie. Let's head back to the phones. In Moncton, New Brunswick, we have Danny Tramley. Danny, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Hello, Marjorie. Marjorie, I have an old rhubarb patch, and it always yields well. But this year, for some reason, the stalks are spindly, and I've never had that problem before.
Well, it's probably because it is such an old, well-established bed, and I would suggest that next spring early, you know, when the leaves are still just these fat little cones.
Yes.
You know, is to dig up the clumps and divide them. What some people do is just take chunks from the outside of a clump and compost the center part of each clump because it's so old, and space them about 3 feet apart, 3 meters apart.
Okay.
Not 3 meters, 3 feet.
3 feet.
Yeah, 1 meter apart.
Because I thought maybe I had made it too rich because I put seaweed and lime in the fall and I put sheep manure this spring, and I thought maybe I made it too rich.
No, I think it's very old. It needs dividing.
It's very old. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you for the call, Danny. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Next up, we have Neil in Coldbrook. Go ahead, Neil.
Hi, Marjorie. Quick question for you. I had a maple tree that was in my backyard that broke during a storm. I removed the tree, and it sat with the stump in it for about a year and a half, and then I finally ground the stump out, and this year I have mushrooms galore growing all over my lawn. My question is, how can I get rid of those mushrooms?
Oh, they're probably feeding on the roots that are stretched out all over the ground. You just keep mowing them down.
Okay.
They won't last forever.
Okay. Perfect.
Sounds like you got just
Thank you very much.
Lots of mowing in your future, Neil. Thank you for the call. Appreciate it.
Yeah. No problem. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom McDonald in Hoyt, New Brunswick is on the line next. We're heading over to New Brunswick, talking about Macintosh apple trees. Tom, are you there?
Hey, how?
Question for Marjorie. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I have 3 apple trees in a row. They're separated about 2 meters apart.
Yes.
And I have one that's smaller than the other. It's about 2 years old. And this year all the fruit shriveled up and the leaves curled in.
Oh, that doesn't sound too good. So when the leaves came out, did they come out fully, like it was a leaf that was the size it should be, or did the leaf?
Yes.
Oh. Well, I'm not sure what might be going on. It does not sound good. If you see any dead wood or diseased wood, like did you see anything on the stems that's like a disease?
Not that I noticed.
Yeah. All I can suggest is in the spring is to cut out the dead wood and make sure that there's no competition from weeds or grass.
Okay.
And if the trees are too close, it might be that they're not getting enough good air circulation and there's some sort of fungal disease that hit the plant. But that doesn't mean you're going to get it every year.
Okay. Now, can I fertilize trees? I don't even know.
Oh, just spread some old rotted leaves or compost over the root zone. Or you could scratch in some bone meal because that can help with flower and fruit production.
Okay. Thank you.
There we go. Thanks, Tom. I didn't know if you could fertilize trees or not either. Thank you for the call.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Thank you. Our number again, 1-800-565-1940, 1-800-565-1940. Lots of folks on the line, but also lots of time still to get in to ask your questions to Marjorie Willison. Our email address is marnoon@cbc.ca, or you can tweet us at CBC Maritime Noon. That is what Jean or Jean Coburn did. This is from our Twitter page. I have potatoes growing in grow bags, but deer have eaten the tops of the plants. Will they still produce fruit, Marjorie?
The same thing happened to us last year. The deer came in and ate potato tops for the first time I've ever seen them do that. And yes, we still got potatoes.
Okay, that's good news for Jean or Jean. That's wonderful. That's, again, from our Twitter account, at CBC Maritime Noon. Also, you can call in 1-800-565-1940. Back to those phone lines. Heading up to Antigonish, we have Anu Ajoshi. She has a question about deterring deer. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Marjorie. You had suggested to use blood meal to deter deer invasion in my garden. I tried it. It did not work.
Oh, too bad.
Yes, I know. Is there anything else I can try? Because I have tried everything except Bobex so far.
Oh, have you tried bars of soap?
Yes, definitely that was my first round of attack,
Oh, dear.
Yes, and pie plates and CDs, everything I have tried.
The only surefire way is to build cages around your plants, like around your vegetables. Our vegetable garden is covered in little cages.
Yes, I'm doing the container
garden. We can lift them and move them,
depending
on the crop.
Exactly. I'm doing the container gardening, and I'm trying to put some type of fencing with the fishing lines around it, and wondering if it will work.
Yes.
And I have one more question for you for my daughter, who had tried to get in last time. Her question is in Halifax, how to stop raccoons trying to eat up her tomato plant from her tiny little balcony.
Oh, again, you have to provide a protective cage and anchor it down, because they can pull off cages unless they're anchored down.
How about
it's awful. It's really discouraging, isn't it?
It is very discouraging, and especially at this time of COVID, we want something different, and it's a good pastime to grow some vegetables or fruit or flowers, right?
Yes.
And the raccoon come and dig up everything.
I know.
So protective cage. How about anything like sage or mint, any of those plants?
No.
Oh, dear.
You need that physical barrier, don't you, Marjorie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you for the questions, Anu. I appreciate it. Thank you for the call.
Thank you.
Take care. Marjorie, back to the quick email we just got. This one's a new one. Bob says he bought a 30-year-old house recently, and we got 3 plants that he's worried about because they're too close to the foundation. Each one of them are 1 foot from the foundation. So there's an 8-foot spruce, roughly same height lilac, and a hydrangea. They're each 1 foot from the foundation. Should he be concerned?
Yes. It will get the spruce out.
Get the spruce out first?
It wants to be big.
Okay.
The lilac, if it's doing well, you could leave it. But if it's quite old, you might want to cut out about a third of the thickest, oldest stems and bring it down to a much smaller size over the next 3 years by cutting out about a third of the old, thick stems.
What's the problem with leaving the spruce there?
Oh, it's just so big. It wants to. It would be like trying to grow a person in a tiny cubic foot cage.
Oh.
It wants to be big.
That poor little spruce.
Yes.
All right, Bob, get on that. Get that spruce out of there. Thank you for the call, Bob. I appreciate it. Let's head back to the phone lines now. We have Edith Berry calling from Clementsport, Nova Scotia. Edith, do you have a question for Marjorie?
No, I don't have a question, but it was a week or so, and Marjorie had 2 other people that called in about a snowball bush that was dying on them. Things were happening. And the same thing happened to me, but it's about 8-9 years ago. And by fall, there were 2. A neighbor had one also, and theirs was completely dead the next year. So I thought, okay, this doesn't look good. And I said, what we're going to do in the fall, I said, my husband, you get out the whatever. And I said, we're going to cut 2/3 of it down. And I did, and I still have it. Now, mind you, every year I've had to, like I say, it's been 8-9 years ago, and every year I have to take just some dish soap and put it in with lots of, the liquid in a sprayer and spray because the leaves, first of all, it would hardly have a blossom on it, but the main thing was I noticed the leaves would start to get holes in them and look like lace eventually. And so every year, in the spring, I started spraying the leaves. And this year, it looked like the old bush. It had beautiful blossoms, and they actually stayed there. Now, once the blossoms were gone, there was a little bit of lace on some of the leaves, so I still sprayed it anyway. I had sprayed it before, but it was just so nice to see it back to what it was originally, because I lived in because we bought it 46 years ago, and that snowball bush was here, and I didn't want to see it die. But I also had an old book. There was a lot of books in this. Everything was in this house when we bought it, and there was an old book in there, and it had about snowball bushes, and that's where it told me what to do.
Thank you so much for this. That
was sure that's on to you because you get more calls about it than I will.
Thank you.
We got tips.
Also, human pee, or if you have an well, it's pretty hard to get a dog or something, right, unless you have one. But human pee will work on certain things, right? So that's a suggestion. Somebody else told me about it, and it worked, because I have deer here all the time.
That took
I don't have a dog anymore.
That took a turn. Edith, what kinds of things?
Just pee, human pee.
What does you said it works on certain things?
Well, keeping deer off.
Yeah,
keeping deer off. Okay.
They just about ruined all of my hostas completely. And it was a neighbor that said, and she had a yard sale, and I said, how come you've got lots of hostas? Because she just lives a couple houses away. She has deer too, and she said, that's what happened to mine. And so her husband would donate the pee for her. So it definitely works on certain plants. I don't know about putting it on vegetables, maybe just on the ground around it. See, it's the smell of it. They know it's human, and they won't come near it.
That is an excellent tip. All kinds of tips flying with back and forth. Thank you so much, Edith, for the call from Clemensport. Marjorie Willison is here taking your gardening questions. You can call now. We still have a couple slots left open to get you in throughout the hour. 1-800-565-1940 is the number. But first, Sandy Smith is here with the latest news.
Thanks, Brett. PEI has dropped its requirement to wear masks in indoor spaces, and it no longer requires Atlantic Canadians with the PEI pass to take a COVID test arriving in the province. New Brunswick's health minister predicts 80% of people eligible for COVID-19 vaccines will have their first dose in the next few days, and the Nova Scotia government is promising to spend more than $96 million over the next 6 years to create new long-term care beds and replace others. These stories and others in more detail at 1 o'clock, Brett.
Thank you so much, Sandy. We will go back to the phone lines, Marjorie, if that's okay with you. Lynn Hardy from Pictou County, from Pictou, Nova Scotia, actually, calling about slugs. Lynn, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question about the best way to tackle slugs.
Remove. I'm always saying, mulch your plants, but in the case of slugs, remove all the mulch from around your vulnerable plants. And some people have had good luck using crushed eggshells around particularly vulnerable plants because they don't like
seem to be eating the potato leaves, like of the seed potatoes.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, unless. I have found that most plants can tolerate about 10% loss of leaf area from various insects and creatures that eat their leaves, and still produce a really good crop.
Okay.
And other people swear by putting out saucers of beer that the slugs go for that, and then you can get rid of them in the morning.
Well, I've got lots of eggshells, so I'll try that. So just around the base of the plant?
Yeah, but crush them really fine, so there's lots of little sharp edges.
Oh, it's the edges that they don't like. Oh, I see.
And one other quick... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Edith, yeah.
One other quick question about the potatoes, seed potatoes. It's been a while. How do you tell when they're ready to harvest?
It does not cause potatoes. But once they flower, that's about the time that they start producing the little potatoes. So several weeks after that.
Oh, okay.
And what we tend to do is kind of carefully dig around the edges of an elderly-looking potato plant and see how the potatoes are coming along. And if you get a decent size, then we dig up the whole thing. And if it's still really small, we leave it alone.
Okay, that's a good idea. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for the call, and I appreciate it. Marjorie, we've got an email about slugs as well. So this is from Sue, saying that she's got lots of slugs on her beans that are just decimating the plants. She's hand-picking the large ones off, but the tiny ones are still there and tough to get at. Even with the eggshell, would you recommend that kind of beer saucer technique?
It's worth a try.
Yeah. Is it because the slugs are attracted to it and then fall in and drown and die, basically?
Yeah. You probably need something a little bigger than a saucer, but, something that they can crawl into and drown in.
Sure, yeah. That's one way to get rid of it. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sue. That was an email from Sue. Thank you very much for that. Heading back to the phone lines, what do we have here? Heading to New Brunswick with Wayne Mullet calling from St. John. Wayne, do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
What's your question for Marjorie?
Hi, Mark. How are you today? I have an apple tree that's probably about, I'm going to guess, at least 30 years old. I can't tell you what type of apple tree it is, other than we get red apples on it and you can eat them. It's not a crab apple tree. And I want to know can I take a branch off of that and produce another apple tree from that?
Oh, apple trees are usually grafted onto another kind of apple rootstock.
Okay.
So the short answer is no, unless you can find a rootstock that it could be grafted to.
Okay.
Now, if you want, would you be? Does your plant need rejuvenation? The one you have? It's still doing well?
30 years. Oh, yes, it's still doing well. It blossoms every year, and I get apples every year from it.
Oh, okay.
And it's not. I know it's not a crab apple tree because you can pick an apple off of it, eat it, and it doesn't taste like a crab apple.
Yes.
I don't know what type of tree it is.
Good. Okay. I don't have anything else to offer you.
Thank you for the call, Wayne. But we've had an apple expert on here before, so we should have Wayne call back when we have the apple expert on. So let's take a look. I actually have a similar email, Marjorie, talking about holly bushes and using the cuttings from holly bushes to start a new bush. This is coming from Lisa. Is that possible? And what time of the year is best for doing that?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I have a neighbor who has a lovely holly bush, and I'm just waiting for another month or two until the new growth has started to firm up a little bit at the base, but the top is still a bit soft. That's a good time to take cuttings of holly and to keep track of whether the cuttings are from a female bush or a male bush, because you need both to get the berries.
Oh, of course. And do you plant them together?
Well, within the same garden somewhere. They don't
see.
have to be exactly side by side.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that email, and thank you for that answer, Marjorie. We talked about plums at the beginning of the conversation here, and we have another question about plums from Mario in Halifax. Mario, do you have a question about a plum tree?
I do, yes. I purchased a property that has a plum tree on it about 3 years ago, and when I first bought it, the first year, there was plums on it, and I noticed there was like a black fungus sort of thing all over the tree. Probably about 80% of the tree is covered in this fungus thing. But there is, like this year, there is still some green on the very top of the tree, but there's no plums. And I'm wondering if there's any way I can save this tree, or what can I do to help this tree get back to healthy?
Yes, it's a common problem in plums and cherries. And if you look closely at the tree, before it gets to the black knot stage, in fact, it's called black knot disease, you'll see kind of olive green swellings on the branches. That's the early phase, and then if they're left, they turn into these, the black stuff. And really, the only thing you can do is to cut out. Dip your pruning shears in a very weak bleach solution after each cut, and cut about a good foot below each olive green swelling and below each black knot. And you may find that if you do that, you have no tree left. When we first bought our place, there were 3 sour cherries, and we did not know about black knot disease, and it progressed, and we lost all 3.
Oh, okay.
So that's what you need to do.
Okay, just trim it back as much as I can, and then if I'm left with anything, great. If not, then oh well.
Yeah.
And Marjorie, was that straight bleach or diluted?
No, a very dilute solution of bleach. Okay. So, 5% solution.
Oh, God. Okay,
yeah,
mostly water.
Yeah.
Okay, Mario, thank you for the call.
Try that. Thank you so much.
Next up, we have Dwight calling about a plum tree again. Lots of plum tree questions. Dwight, what's your question?
Well, I think it's been answered. Black knot.
I think it's similar. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I cut it out this spring, and it's come back with a vengeance. I think if I prune like your guest just said, a foot back, I might as well prune it at the butt, because I don't think there'll be any tree left. If I get another black knot, how can I prevent this from happening again if I get another plum tree?
You can spray it in early spring. And I'm so frustrated because I can't think of the name right now. It's dormant oil spray.
Okay.
It can help, but you have to do it early in the spring.
Right.
Yeah, it's really discouraging when you start cutting out all the affected branches.
Yes, yeah. I think if I cut everything back a foot, I'd have nothing but a stem sticking up in the air. That's all I'd have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it came so fast. It came within, I'd probably say 6 weeks or more, it'd come back after I'd trimmed it.
Yeah. Well, see, it's in the air, it's in the trees, in the woods, it's everywhere. And when we have a muggy spring, humid, it makes it all that much easier for fungal diseases and other diseases to get going.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay,
anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you for the call, Dwight. I appreciate it. That's lots of questions that we've had, Marjorie, about plum trees. Let's go to a quick email. This one came in just 7 minutes ago, so nice and responsive here. This is coming from Gail Daw saying, how can I revitalize an old orange azalea, which is bloomed, but only had green spikes and no leaves this year?
Oh, interesting. Now, I'm not sure what she means by green spikes. I assume she means new growth.
I imagine so.
That could be because the plant has, put on a burst of growing more leaves and branches, and when it does that, it puts off flowering for a year or two. That may be what's happening. Or she could maybe scratch in some bone meal. If it's a very old plant, it may just need significant pruning to encourage young new growth. And if that's what she means by these young green spikes, then that's a good sign.
Interesting. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Marjorie. And thank you, Gail, for emailing in your question. Again, our email address, marnoon@cbc.ca. Our phone line, 1-800-565-1940. That's 1-800-565-1940. Anywhere in the Maritimes, including in Albert Bridge, Nova Scotia. We have Lori on the phone. Lori, what's your question?
Hi there. Hi, Marjorie. I have a young cherry tree that was planted 3 or 4 years ago. This is the third year that I was going to get fruit off of it. It's produced a fruit every year, the last 3 years. And this year I thought I was going to get a bumper crop. I had all kinds of blossoms and all kinds of green cherries that grew on them. And then last week I noticed that these cherries weren't progressing. They were wilting. It's an actual cherry, but instead of getting red, it got brown. And when I touched them, they would just fall right off. I'm not sure all of them are doing this, but...
Yeah. I don't know that this is the case, but you may remember that, spring was coming along nicely, and then we had some bitter frosts. And if there was freezing when your cherry was in bloom, then the flowers would die, and you wouldn't get fruit.
Well, they went past the flower stage. I actually they look like pits, but they were starting to grow and turn red, actually, and then they just stopped, the fruit itself.
Yeah, it's like... The flowers get started, but they fail to continue, and it's usually because there's been frost damage, and so they didn't get properly pollinated.
So
you think that's not the case? Maybe it's not.
No, it went beyond the flower stage, though. Like, it went to the actual fruit was growing on it and starting to turn red. And then all of a sudden, they're just withering. And when I touch them, they fall off.
Yeah, it does sound like they didn't get properly pollinated for some reason. Maybe it was too cold and windy.
Yeah, it sounds like a temperature. Okay. It could be a temperature thing, Lori. Interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry about your cherry tree.
I'm very disappointed.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it.
Yeah,
I was ready to beat the birds to it this year, but I'm not going to get a chance.
Well, we gardeners have to learn to say, next year will be better.
I'll hope for that, yes. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Lori. Bye. Marjorie, how many years have you said next year will be better yourself?
Oh, probably for the decades I've been doing this show.
We're going to stay on the phone lines with Owen Brown from Dartmouth. Owen, what's your question?
Hi, Marjorie. Thanks for taking my call. We've been planting lilies around the house for a number of years now, but last year we had a problem with an insect called the lily midge, and it seems to be affecting some of the early blooming plants. And what we've learned a little bit about is that the insect gets inside the bud that wants to bloom, and it lays eggs. And we are supposed to pull that off, and we put it in a bag in the freezer for about 6 months to kill it, and then we get rid of it. Apparently, you're not supposed to let it drop onto the ground, where it will just, I guess, infect the ground. Just wonder if you know anything about it, and where does it come from? And
I think it's daylilies that you're talking about.
That's correct.
Yeah, because lilies are a different kind of plant, and I do know that daylilies are being infected with this, and I know it because I see it in my daylilies, and I just am ruthless about picking off buds that look infected.
Okay.
And the very first time I saw these, I pulled off a couple of buds and just dropped them on the ground, not knowing any better. I certainly don't do that now. I pick up I make sure I hang on to every one I take off. And what I found interesting is that one patch that was heavily infected last year is absolutely fine this year, and a patch that was absolutely fine last year, like quite separate, like 50 feet away, is infected this year.
That's
so it's a hit and miss sort of thing.
The only place we've had a problem with it is in the front garden that we dug out completely about 3 years ago, and we brought all in new soil and from like gardening stores, and so it's just kind of weird. But I guess we're doing the right thing, so we just have to keep at that.
Yeah, and you did not cause it by doing what you've just described. They would have come in on wind and yeah.
It's not your not your fault.
It's not your fault.
Mother Nature.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Owen, for the call. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye now. Let's go to Victoriaville, Nova Scotia. Suzette is on the line talking about cherry trees. We've been talking about plums and slugs and cherries. Suzette, what's your question about cherry trees?
Yes, hello, Brett. By the way, it's good to hear you on the radio as well as seeing you on the television. And Marjorie, we've had our cherry trees for the past 5 years, and we've always been able to harvest delicious, beautiful cherries. Last weekend, when we went to harvest the cherries from our 3 trees, the cherries had brown rot on them. Any idea what might have caused this?
Oh, yes, brown rot is a problem with cherries, and yeah.
Doesn't sound good.
I'm trying to remember what it is we have to do. I think there's I think a Bordeaux mixture, and I'm trying to remember what it's like. It's good at sulfur.
If you want, Marjorie,
think about lime sulfur.
If you want, I can always, the young lady that picked up the call at CBC, I can always leave our email address, and she could pass it on to you if you want.
Yeah, no, I've got it, because there will be other people who want to know too. Okay. But using dormant oil early in the spring, using lime sulfur when the plant is dormant, it helps to kill off fungi that are on the plant. But you need to do that early in the spring before the leaves come out. You mustn't do it when it's in leaf.
Okay, my husband is making note of all this. Perfect. I think that's it, Marjorie.
Good luck. Okay. Bye-bye.
Well, and a better year next year to you. Thank you, Marjorie and Brett. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Suzette, for the call. I appreciate it. I love that people all across the Maritimes are scribbling down notes, Marjorie, with all these little tips. And I'm so glad that this came back around to talk about again. We're going to head to Moncton. Dana, what do you have to talk about?
Just about how to protect against pests.
Yeah.
And I just really, first of all, want to say really appreciate the show and Marjorie. I was the guy that came up with a $10 lamp there a few months ago. I don't know, a couple of people called in after. I don't know if you remember that. But anyway, the thing with slugs, I found through my experience, I haven't heard it on the show yet, copper wire.
Oh, yes. How do you use
wire?
it has a charge to it. And when you put copper wire around the base of whatever you're growing, they will not pass it. Deer works, but you have to replace it every 3 or 4 days. Another thing that I haven't heard is cornmeal. It's a natural thing. It does mold and it does go fungus, but when they eat it, they can't digest it. And you can see them dying as they go up your plant, and because they leave the trails and the cornmeal is undigested.
And there am I, making notes madly.
Yeah.
So thank you for this.
Anything else?
Another thing I haven't heard for deer, if you have a dog and you brush them, especially when they're molting in the spring or fall, husky types or shepherd types, take fishing line and tie it around a branch on all 4 directions of the wind, and your deer will be diminished greatly. And kudos to the lady earlier that was talking about urine for a rabbit and deer and all animal deterrent. But she didn't mention that you have to put it in the 4 directions of the wind because the scent is carried and they will not come around. And I have had animals pass through my gardens but never stop. So
thank you.
That's a lot of tips. That was a very condensed. That's the kind of call we like here, Dana. Thank you so much for the call.
Yes, and I really appreciate the help.
A lot of trial and error, and the thing is, urine's free, and the thing is, the trick about it is the longer that you leave it in a water bottle, a clear water bottle or something like that, every day it gets worse and worse and worse, and they don't, like raccoons, skunks, deer, rabbit, because it's territorial, and animals operate on territorial sense, and it's very important to put it in the 4 directions.
Yeah, perfect. Hey, thank you for the call, Dana. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was Dana calling from New Brunswick, heading back to Nova Scotia now. Kelsey Elliott talking about slugs again. Hey, Kelsey.
Hi.
What's your question?
It's actually just a comment,
Sure.
and obviously not as big as your last caller, because that was phenomenal. We've tried the eggshells, had hit or miss with it on our squash plants about 10 years ago, but we found wood ash from like a wood stove. If you sprinkle it around the plants, I don't know what it does. I don't know if it kills it or if they just don't like crossing it, but that's worked really well. And I know this is a terrible year for slugs.
Thank you for that.
Anyway, but I really like leaving the urine in the bottle for several days to make it smell really great.
All kinds of tips here, just barely safe for the radio. Kelsey, thank you so much for the comment about slugs. That's great.
All right, thanks, and thanks, Marjorie. Love your show.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, Kelsey. All right, Fredericton, New Brunswick, back over to New Brunswick. Dory Lynn. Dory, what's your question?
Hi there. I was just calling about the deer problem.
You got a problem with deer?
No, we don't have a problem with deer, and we live in the middle of a deer yard.
Okay.
We had a lot of problem with deer, and my husband's very tenacious, and he would keep on planting his garden. One year we did not. And we had put up a fence, and they jumped the fence. And so anyway, he eventually just put an electric fence around the garden, and he runs a cord from the house. And he put one string about 18 to 24 inches off the ground, and that's for the taller animals, and then for another one about 4 to 6 inches from the ground, and that takes care of small animals like groundhogs. And we have not had one problem with any animal since.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't do that in the city.
We can't do that. Marjorie, we missed that. You can't do that in the city?
That's right.
Because of regulations?
Yeah, it's fine in the country.
Safety issue in the city, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you live in the country, Dory? Just say that you do.
Well, yeah.
So that is a good tip if you live out in the country. Not so legal if you live in the city. So thank you for the tip, Dory.
Okay, you're so welcome.
Take care.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Let's go to Jesse Cooper. Just a couple minutes left. So Jesse, nice and quick from Canning, Nova Scotia. Jesse, what's your question?
Yeah, it's just an observation on some of the cherry failures for everyone. I'm a commercial grape grower, and I deal with the rots. quite a lot, and it sounds like, and we have a few ornamental trees at one of the vineyards I work at, and it's definitely, by the sounds of it, like what you call brown rot or sour rot, and then there's a more technical term, it's called botrytis. Sometimes they call it like gray rot. So if anyone, goes online and Googles, but definitely products that have copper in it that you spray periodically early on in the season can definitely have a big impact. And I hope that maybe helps everyone get delicious cherries. So thank you. Great show.
Thank you for that. I was trying to remember what it was.
There you go. Thank you, Jesse. That's fantastic.
Okay, you guys have a great day.
You too. Okay, well, we'll keep it nice and quick. I'm sorry for everyone else on the line, but Anita, you are our last caller. Anita, go ahead with your question from Fredericton.
Thank you. I have some very old peonies, and I'm just wondering about the best way to rejuvenate them. They're old, like 30, 35 years old. And should I dig them up and replant them in a more shallow way, or what's the issue?
If they're still flowering and looking good, don't touch them. Otherwise, you can divide them in the spring. Some people do it in the fall.
And they should be planted quite shallow?
Well, no more than an inch, absolutely no deeper than what they were growing in previously.
All right, excellent.
Nothing,
Thank you.
Nothing above the buds.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Anita, for the call. I appreciate it. Marjorie, that is all the time we have for our call-in. Thank you so much for taking all of these calls. It was rapid fire. It was great.
Oh, and I learned several things today that was really helpful to me.
Yeah, it kind of went back and forth with the tips and the information, didn't it?
Yeah, no, it was really good.
Wonderful. Well, Marjorie, thank you so much for joining us.
Take care, everyone.
Have a great day. Our guest was Marjorie Willison. She's the author of The East Coast Gardener. You can still have your say even if you didn't make it on. I know there's a bunch of folks who didn't make it on. Sorry about that. You can leave us a message, 1-800-565-5463. That is the number to leave a message for us after the show, or you can email us, CBC Maritime Noon. A reminder that Monday on the show, we have a great program if you're in the market for a new car or a new-to-you vehicle. Be sure to tune in because our guest is going to be George Eny. He's from the Automobile Protection Association and the co-author of the Lemonade Car Guide. Well, that is it for this week here on Maritime Noon. Thanks so much for joining me this week. Mr. Bob Murphy will be back in the chair on Monday morning, again, talking cars, so be sure to call in with your questions about new or used vehicles. My name is Brett Ruskin. I'll be putting a tie back on Monday morning, back to my old job on TV. I hope everyone has a safe and enjoyable weekend ahead. Thank you so much for listening.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.